Imagine this. You wake up in an area you're not familiar with. You have no memory of how you got here, and you try to take in your surroundings. But all it does is gives you more questions. You call out to somebody, but the only response is the echo of your voice. So you try to figure out what's going on. But as you try to find your own answers, you feel something's off. With every step and sound you make, you hear something in the distance. You're not alone. Whatever it is, it heard you. If you haven't been introduced to or seen any horror-related media, you're very familiar with this simple premise or trope. It serves as the basis for many stories in the horror genre, as it's effective in scaring or installing terror in the person. It can be done in so many ways as it acts like a canvas of what you want to tell. This trope naturally messes with how we would try to survive in this situation and plays into our primal fears. And that's just with the setting. We still don't know what the thing is, and it could be anything. This trope works well in horror games, and the particular horror game I want to talk about is Monstrum. Some of you may have heard about this game as it's an indie game that was played by Markiplier back in the day, or you may have seen it from other YouTubers or streamers playing it. But to those who haven't seen the game, Monstrum is a horror game that takes place on a ship. It uses the same trope I mentioned earlier. Your main objective is try to survive and get off the ship, as there's 3 ways to escape, as they're interchangeable as you could pick either one. One is a submarine, one is a helicopter, and lastly a life raft. Each of them takes time to get ready, as there are key items around the ship you need to find. But along the way, you're not alone. There's something else on the ship and it will try to kill you, as it's the reason why the ship is empty. Now, everyone has a fear of something, but everyone's fears are unique and different. What scares me might not scare you, and vice versa. But Monstrum does something unique, as it has to do something with the monster as it reflects the player's fears. And not only that, it has a unique playstyle, as in the developer's words, which are on the store page, it remixes the survival horror formula. But before I get to talk about this, here's kind of a spoiler warning, as if you haven't played Monstrum before, I heavily recommend it. It is a good horror game, it has good atmosphere, a good soundtrack, and pretty good scares, as it doesn't heavily rely on jump scares. In a way, it's similar to Alien Isolation. So if you like that and you want something similar to it, you're gonna get more of that with this game. But this game can be a little difficult. So anyways, if you don't want to experience that to be spoiled, click off the video and play it. And then after playing it, come back to this video and see what the monsters represent. But for those who don't care about spoilers, keep watching the video. And hey, if you like everything so far, make sure to like and subscribe. So with that out of the way, let's get into the video. As I said in the intro, the game starts with you waking up in a barricaded room. You have no clue how you got here or where you are. Once you leave this room, you get a flashlight and a fuse, and then you begin to explore your surroundings. You realize that nobody's around, it's just you. Every noise you make, such as walking around, running, and opening the doors, seems to echo around the rooms, evoking more the emptiness that you are alone. Once you explore a good amount of where you spawn, you either head upstairs or downstairs, or even head outside, depending on where you spawn. And you realize where you are. You're on a ship. A cargo ship to be exact, but it's adrift in the sea, and it's deep in the ocean. No landmass in sight, just a large stretches of water, and with it being nighttime, it's much harder to see the water. The thing is, if this is a cargo ship, where are all the crew members? There should be people walking around and keeping the ship in check. Where did everyone go? Already the game gives us a sense of isolation, and in a way a liminal space feeling, which are both off-putting. To add to that, the game immerses us by having a silent protagonist whose only way to communicate is through the journal. This design style can make the player connect with the game, as they can envision themselves as the character reacting to the same theme. And as you continue exploring around the ship, you begin to notice a weird noise and odd things, like hearing heavy footsteps. And some of the doors you close seem to be punched out, as these were the areas you already explored. What's causing all these disturbances? Aren't we the only ones here? By the time you make a lot of noise, it already heard you and you finally get to see it. Or it found you. This thing is what caused the ship to be empty. And since it's the first time playing the game, you're definitely going to die to it. So you're going to start a new run, with things being a little bit different this time, like the spawn room. But it doesn't matter, you already know what the monster is and you're expected to see the same thing. But this time we hear something crawling in the vents. The other monster didn't make that noise. So again, as you make enough noise, it comes to find you. But maybe this time you'll try hiding. Each time you die and with every new run, something is different. Whether it be the spawn room, the layout of the ship interior, items, and monsters, something is different no matter what. This mechanic is a roguelike mechanic you have seen in other roguelike games, and Monstrum does it well, and it helps elevate the horror of it. I don't think any other horror game has done something similar to this, and if there is, put it down in the comments so I could check it out later. But that's why I recommend playing this game first and going in blind. This roguelike mechanic does an amazing job of introducing what monster you got. And going back to Markiplier for his video of his second playthrough, he had an amazing counter with the second monster for the first time. But back to the mechanic of the game, as it plays well with the fear of the unknown, as you're unsure of what you got. And once you figure out what monster you got, it tends to put you at ease as you figure out how to counter it. But the game doesn't stop there with playing with your fears, as each monster represents a unique fear that might invoke terror in the player. So there are 3 monsters, the Brute, the Hunter, and the Fiend. And each of them has a different mechanics that fit in with their represented fear. We'll go in order of what they represent, so let's first start with the Brute. The Brute is the most recognizable monster in the series, as it's seen a lot in the promotional art for this game and is a poster child for this one and its sequel. The Brute supposedly represents a fear of physical danger, but this type of fear can be applied to all the monsters, so I thought of other fears of what the Brute can represent. He can represent a fear of fire and strength. But with the first impressions of the design for the Brute, as to me it looks like a garbled mess of what a fire would cause due to the intense heat, as it causes it to fuse with something. Now I'm not going to get into the lore with the game, as you don't need it for this particular monster, and does little to elevate the horror of it. But if by popular demand I could do a lore video for Monstrum, if you guys want to see that. But anyways, back to the Brute's design, as it's a mash cross between a person and whatever it became, as its growth allowed it to increase its strength, as you can see with its right arm and with the whole Brute's build. Although having a lot of strength, it does have its drawback, as out of all the 3, the Brute is considered the dumb one, as its only thoughts are just hunting anything down that's not it. How this translates to the game is done really well, as when it roams, you hear its heavy footsteps. It can either be above you, below you, or at the same level as you. With this, you can tell where it's at. And if you don't use the footsteps to your advantage, there's another way you can tell that it's nearby, as it has an outer glow with its face, as you can see a bright orange light coming from it, and it typically lights up the hallway. This outer glow is very helpful for the player, as you can see him across the hallway as he hasn't spotted you yet. You can take advantage of its dumb state, as you can make a lot of noise with some objects you find, and it'll always be drawn to it, giving you a chance to put as much distance as you can, and even when it spots you. But if you're not lucky enough and it does spot you, just run. Don't even bother closing the doors, he'll just punch it out of the way. And also the Brute is considered the fastest out of all of them, but you can still outrun it. Even when it's chasing you, the soundtrack reflects it too, which you can hear in the background of this video for this section, as each of the monsters have unique music. For the Brute, when hearing his chase music, it reflects his movements. When he's stomping towards you, it sings with the music, and you can occasionally hear a hiss of steam and whistling sounds in the same theme, again reflecting his burn design. As when he's roaming around the hallways, as the heat that's radiating off of him is messing with the environment. If you don't have the chance to outrun them or get stuck in the dead end, the best bet is to hide, and you better hope he didn't see you hiding. As you find your hiding spot, it is terrifying to hear the door you probably just closed get smacked. And you hear his footsteps in the same room attempting to find you. Also, when hiding, the chase theme changes to a muffled soundtrack of that version, which is a neat detail from the developer. And when you successfully escape them, it plays an ambient track of the monster, as when you're exploring around the ship, you constantly hear this track. Which adds more to the detail of the horror of the game, as you're constantly put on edge, as you're unaware if he's going to be coming around the corner. Then again, you can hear his footsteps too. To the Brute's intelligence, it won't spend as much time trying to find your hiding spot if you successfully hide. It'll find one likely spot, and if he finds nothing, then you just give up the search and go back to roaming around, away from the player, as he thinks the player might just disappear out of nowhere. So you survive this encounter, and when trying to escape from the ship, you're more likely to re-encounter him. But this time you have more items to counter against him, and since he is a being of fire, the main thing to use against him is a fire extinguisher. It stuns him for a bit, giving you more room to escape. And never use a flare gun on him, as you just walk it off, but you do get an achievement with it. The Brute is something you don't underestimate, as it's a quicker way to die to him. And when you manage to escape him, he will try a last minute attempt to get you, as you can see in the ending cutscene for this monster, as I went for the life raft ending. Although the Brute is one of the simpler monsters in the game and in the franchise, it doesn't hurt the horror aspect of the creature, as some people might find the Brute terrifying, as he does a great job conveying a fear of fire, physical danger, and strength. For me, he is not the scariest out of all of them, and other players might share my thoughts too. As compared to the other two monsters, players are more scared of them. The Hunter represents a fear of being stalked and paranoia. And for this monster, I'm gonna be heavily biased on this one, as out of the three, I find her the most terrifying. It more has to do with her mechanics, as I imagine myself in real life trying to survive against this monster. As this creature takes on more IRL elements, as out of the three, it is the more animalistic one. As the design for her and the mechanics for her, they incorporate some animal tactics that are used in real life, and the Hunter uses them. So the Hunter for me brings out the old primal fear that when humans used to be hunted back in the day. But with the Hunter's design, even though it does not have an actual animal design to it, it does have a unique appearance, as it almost has a skeletal frame to it, has transparent skin as it's see-through, and getting up close to it with a light you can see its organs. The Hunter has somewhat of a human look to it, just like the Brute. And the Hunter has mandibles which flare up as you can see them when it kills you, or you can see her claws when she kills you. And lastly, the Hunter has beady eyes. Due to his transparent skin, it is hard to see her in dark areas, so you better hope you have a source of light, as unlike the Brute which announces itself, the Hunter takes on the stealth approach, as she doesn't face you head on. She heavily relies on ambushing you. She waits when you have your guard down or when you're distracted. The same rules apply. Make enough noise and she'll come out, as it's basically instant, as her most common way to getting to you is coming out of the vent. And it's random of what vent she comes out of, as it could be either one that blocks one of your paths, or it could be right behind you. And sometimes it's a 50-50 when she comes out, as she screeches when she's coming out of the vent, but sometimes she doesn't make that noise. So you have to rely on your ears, as the vent opening can be loud, and when she's out of the vent, each step she makes a wet slapping sound, which sounds funny for the first time. And again, it matters where she spawns at. She could be on the other side of the wall, but you might not have noticed and you accidentally stumble across her, so you gotta heavily rely on your ears. And by any chance, if your means of escape is blocked off, well, you're gonna have to hide. And it better be a good hiding spot, or you better hope she didn't spot you. She takes her time trying to find you and your hiding spot, as she is smarter than the Brute, and she'll check as much as hiding spots as she can before taking off and re-entering the vents. If you can't escape her, well, you're in good hands, as you could outrun her. Still get to the end of the ship or head deeper inside, but try not to make as much noise as you can, as when you make it to your safe spot and make a lot of noise, she will reappear again. In some instances when panicking going against her, it may seem there are two of her, but it's not, it's just one of her. Instead, she's very knowledgeable about the ship and going through the vent system, as again, no matter what, she is constantly stalking you. No part of the ship is a safe area with her, as out of nowhere she can pop out, as even on the main deck of the ship, she just crawls up the hull of it to ambush you. As opposed to the other two monsters which take their time to get to you, which gives you room in order to escape them. But with her, it's kinda difficult. So if you're in one area then you're occasionally making noise, she will get confident that she might know where your area is, and so she will lay traps around that area, as these traps are boils and they can appear on any surface. And again, make enough noise around them or get close to them, she'll pop out of them. There's one area on the ship that I didn't get to talk about, and this is where I'm going to talk about, as her traps really work well in here. And this area is the cargo area. And in my opinion, the Hunter makes this area nerve-wracking to walk through, as there's permanent boils in some of the torn cargo containers. And this cargo area acts like a maze, as you can use a shortcut to get to the other side of the ship, and well, you need to explore this area as there's some key items here too. And also it's what the other two monsters use quickly to get to the other side of the ship. Again, going to the maze portion, there's a lot of dead ends on here, and if you're not paying attention you can end up in circles in this area. And the monsters easily quickly traverse it while you have a tough time doing so. So if you activate her in this area, you're practically screwed. You can counter her by using the flare gun and the fire extinguisher, but your best bet is to use fire, as again she's an animal, so she will get scared and will go away if you light in near her. I didn't get the footage for this, but trust me, it works. But of all the chase music in the game, she has the best one. It captures the feeling of an animal chasing you, with the theme reflecting of a panic state, afraid that she might pop out of nowhere to ambush you in the middle of your chase. The sound of rushing water and what seems to be a machine going crazy is to the panic state of you being chased down by this thing. The sound of water is heard more with her ambient track when it's playing. Her theme perfectly captures the fear of what she represents, as after stalking you for so long, she acts upon it and chases you. And when she's not even chasing you, she's studying you, waiting for the right moment. And her sounds sync in with the music really well, and adds more fear of what she represents in her theme song. And again, I'm gonna say it again, I think the hunter is one of the best monsters in the game, as it's an animal just hunting you down. Overall, the hunter is a jack of all trades, neither being too smart nor too dumb, just the perfect balance. Players see her as the second scariest, but the most frustrating to go up against due to her AI and the mechanics she has, which I can agree with, as getting footage of getting the endings was difficult with her, as she was the last monster I needed to beat and it took a lot of tries and time to beat her. But still, she's one of my favorite monsters to go up against, and I always poop my pants whenever I get her. So that was the hunter, the second monster in the game, and we're going to be heading to the last monster, the Fiend, which most players consider the scariest. The Fiend represents the fear of the insane and unpredictable. It is the most unique monster out of the three, as it takes more of an otherworldly design, almost looking demonic. And again, it has a humanoid look to it, as it goes more into the human-like design, as it looks like a floating corpse. The Fiend, as you can see, is very different from the others, which goes in with the unpredicted nature of this monster, as you're more expecting something similar to the hunter and the brute. And then you see this thing come out of nowhere from the darkness. When there was an update going to add the third monster, the developers made sure to be cryptic about it of what it looked like. The Fiend takes on more of an unnatural approach, as it relies on its telekinetic nature to move around the ship. So basically it floats around, constantly having a purple haze to it. And due to it floating around, it hardly makes any sound. But there are other ways to identify this if you got this monster. Once you start to see lights flicker at the end of the hallway or in the room you're in, that means he's heading towards you. But it has a varying light level, so it depends of how far he is or how close he is. If he's on the same area as you are, the lights will continuously flicker and stay dim, which means he's actively looking for you in that same area. You'll know when you're not near him, as when you see the lights stop flickering. Although it is much harder to know where he's at in non-powered areas. Your only best bet to know when he's near is using a flashlight, as it flickers too when he is near. If it's near and you don't have a flashlight or you're in a non-powered area, you can hear its breathing, and the noises vary from time to time, as it's constantly making this noise, as it's in constant pain. The other noise you can hear is when it's using its telekinetic powers. To hide against this monster is kind of not ideal, as he's the smartest out of the three, but it's not really implemented in the game, although he will remain persistent in following you no matter what. It's just better to go from one place to the next. And with it being smart, there's some mechanics that are implemented in it too, but some of it's not fully. There's one mechanic is that he's hard to distract, as it's knows he's being tricked and will just straight up ignore it. And the other thing what he's not tend to be smart about is that he doesn't check every hiding spot like the hunter, and it doesn't tend to linger on. So it's slightly better than the brute. Some of the times when I go against this monster, I always accidentally stumble across it, as its back was always turned to me trying to find me in that same area where it heard me in. But in other cases, I walked in front of it, which killed me. That is how much sound he doesn't make, so you really have to pay attention when you go up against him. You can lock the doors, but he will just open them quietly, so again, pay attention to it. In the case if you get chased by him, you can outrun him, as he's the slowest out of the three. But it is aware that it's the slowest, as if you're in the line of sight, it will try to stun you to catch up to you. And this is where the part where mostly people are scared of this monster. If it catches you, as the way it kills you, it does it in a sadistic manner. Make sure to do it in a slow and drawn out manner. It does it because it's in constant pain and wants to take out in others. And when it's killing you, it tends to laugh about it. With the way how it kills you, I think it perfectly represents the fear of the insane. And also in the game, he has a ton of unique kills. And also too, the way how it kills you fits in with his unpredictable nature. As opposed to the other monsters, they kill you in quick succession. The same rules apply to him, as you can still use your flare gun, fire, and the fire extinguisher to stun him for a bit. But the fire doesn't drive him away like the hunter, it just slows him down. For the Fiend's theme, it is unlike the other two, as it doesn't give a sense of urgency as it's played slowly. The track sounds like you're filled with so much fear as this highly intelligent creature is coming out to get you, and every decision you make matters in your survival. Or also too, the track can represent that you're filled with so much fear that you don't know how to react to this type of nature of this monster. In the track there are breathing sounds which are separate from the Fiend, and on their own it sounds like a breathing machine. But again, like with the other monsters, the Fiend sounds mix well with its own theme song too, as it syncs up. If you have this monster, you're going to be particularly screwed in one area, which is the cargo area, as there's no lights in this area, so you have to use a flashlight, so you better hope you got that or you then run out of batteries of it, as it's the only way to identify if he's nearby. The Fiend does a great job of capturing the fear of the insane and unpredictable, with its mechanics, song, and design. It's no wonder why many players consider it to be the most scariest, as it's aware of inflicting pain and it wants to inflict as much as possible. For me, it was the second scariest monster to go up against, and once you learn his patterns, it's pretty easy to go up against it. And it was my first monster to escape. I also like how for the monster's ending and all the cutscenes the lights flicker in the background too, which adds more to the details of this monster. And so that was the Fiend. And so that's all the monsters for Monstrum. We have the Brute representing the fear of fire and strength, the Hunter representing the fear of stalking and paranoia, and lastly the Fiend representing the fear of the insane and unpredictable. They all do a great job of what they represent and captures the player's fear for all of them. Even though the player might not be scared of what those each fear, at least it balances it out with the other monster. And the same fear is enhanced with the setting of the ship, and the whole game mechanics elevate it more, with it being more roguelike, as it fits in with the whole fear of the unknown, as you're unsure of what you got. There was a sequel to the game, but it was more of a Dead by Daylight clone, and players didn't want that type of playstyle, as they wanted the sequel to the game to be an enhanced and updated version of the first one. The developers Junkfish are still interested in Monstrum, but there's not going to be a third one anytime soon. The whole game mechanics, you might not agree with me on this one, but I feel like one series of games that can inspire from this mechanics is the Backrooms. As a lot of Backrooms games use the same monsters, or the ones I played use the same monsters, so I might be wrong on that. But the way how this game mechanics is designed of it being roguelike can really help elevate the horror in the Backrooms games. That's just my opinion. So anyways, I highly recommend playing this game, even though this video does spoil the thrill of it with the whole fear representation and everything else, but give it a try. It's an underrated classic, and if you're looking to play horror games or indie ones, again give it a try. But I think that's all I have to talk about for today. I hope you guys have a nice day. This is Mazer Argo signing out.